so that leads me to the point of your thoughts on this push that we're seeing in mainly Republican-led states to ban the teaching or the implementation of critical race theory in the classroom.
Yeah, I think the interesting part about it is that I think the case of critical race theory being something that's eliciting some ill thought in regard to how we know acknowledge history is incredibly ludicrous. That's the first part of it, because critical race theory as itself is something that comes out of law schools. It was started by a lot of Black folks in Harvard and some of the more elite universities across the country that started to think about these things, and it's a takeoff of some of the other critiques we have and theorizations that we have as well. But those things are taught at the graduate level of education, not in K through 12. So that's the first part, is that I think some context around what happens. Now, very much so, people can bring that language and that education into the K through 12 space, but that is not anything that we see happening. I think what's really happening is an erasure of history that doesn't serve white people in general. And that is that white people have done more damage than good over the course of this history. And I think that's something that's not wanting to be told. And just one last part in regard to this too, I think we have to be very vigilant to the overwhelming conversation of the political aspect of this as well, which is that when we start to see localized conversations and states start to get into this conversation, we're trying to build groundswell so that we can have a larger federal conversation. So some people may be wondering, why are these things happening in Florida and these places? Well, because those are battlegrounds for when we talk about elections and we're coming into midterms and we start thinking about these things. There's no better place to start but then what we think is the most vulnerable, which will be children. So this is also a political move as well, among everything.
So what does that mean for what when I say we, I mean the Black community, should be pushing for, can take action on? Like, what do you think needs to happen in the face of these bannings that we're watching play out?
Yeah, I think that there has to be context added to this too, because to say that you want to not include critical race theory in there, let's say we even go for that. That does not exclude the fact that we have an adequate conversation about history. And I think that that's what the biggest concern is. The critical race theory is one portion of a theory of thoughts about how race and racism impacts people over time. And to be very honest, the most crippling part about this is that race and racism don't just affect Black people or people of ethnic minorities. It affects white people as well, because you live inside of a space where you feel as you have a misrepresentation of what the world is and how you're influencing and influenced by it. And that lack of education is something that I think is a critical issue that we have to be focused on. But even with that, if you take critical race theory out the question, there's still a history that cannot be denied, and that can't be missed. So I think inside of these areas, we have to be very clear that we don't have to talk about the theorizations of scholars inside of this work, but we do have to have a critical conversation about race and racism and the history of this country as it exists as a proponent in these conversations.
Yeah. And I think definitely I'm appreciating this moment that we're having and talking about it, especially kind of as a direct offshot of Juneteenth, right? And what what we just experienced, and this being declared a federal holiday. Something else that I was thinking about and watching that live stream and thinking about Juneteenth was just, we just not too long ago commemorated the Tulsa race riot, the race massacre, right? And since then, or not on some platforms since then, there have definitely been conversations around the state of economics within the Black community. And given that you are the founder of Invest BLK or Invest Black, curious to get your take on collective economics, on where you feel we are, how far we've come, how much further we have to go. I mean, just your thoughts in general on this as a Juneteenth reflection.
Yeah, I think that's what makes this so important, that we do have holidays like this and that we do celebrate in appropriate context. That's why Juneteenth is incredibly important. And from the point of economics, I think the biggest thing that we have, the reason why history can't be dissolved from out of our educational system, is because when we look at Tulsa, when we look at Rosewood, when we look at Move in Philadelphia, these are all instances where communities were bombed, firebombed, had bombs laid on them, had turpentine through on top of it, turpentine bombs through on top in Tulsa, fire bombs and shootings happening in Rosewood, when people were building economic systems to be able to support themselves, void of white people in that space and of dominant culture in that space. So that is a history that we have to also include inside of this. But the reality is that every time we've built something for ourselves, no matter what it's looked like, it's been attacked in very, very violent ways. So I think economy is one portion of the conversation, but I think we also have to be very realistic to what happens when we separate ourselves in any capacity to be able to build up our own cooperative systems. We are oftentimes attacked. And then the narrative is actually shifted to say that we almost did it to ourselves. What you see in Tulsa, you see in Rosewood, and you see also with Move, that when people try to build up their own liberated systems, a lot of times the narrative is shifted into a way to where it places the blame on us too. So I think that's harmed us in a lot of ways, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, in the ways that we think about economy. But to that same end, I don't think that there's been no inroads. I think we've done lots of things. Even being on WURD is a move, you know what I mean, in that direction. Being able to see entrepreneurism rise among Black women, you know what I mean, is a move in the ways that we see this. Like, a lot of things have happened. It just still, we have to have context. And I think that's the biggest thing.
I want to talk about your book. Because the title itself just caught me. It's just like Blackwash. And I was like, what is this? Where is he going with this? So tell us a little bit about Blackwashed.
Yeah, I'll show a copy of the book just to kind of give a perspective of it. And these are a group of 30 Black folks on the cover. And that was really just the origins of it. I wanted to be able to celebrate Black folk and be able to have something that was washed with us on the pages. So like, it just literally is about a celebration of Black folk. The address a heritage growing up in South Philadelphia and growing up in a community that was very tight and close-knit, but also had themes of anti-Blackness inside of it. The way that we talked about people that had intimate relationships with drugs, the ways that we talked about, getting out of a hood, those types of things are immediately related to how we view anti-Blackness. So I had to talk about my origins to be able to get to the point of talking about celebration. And I celebrate that as well, because that is not things that we did to ourselves. Those are a part of a larger systemic portion of things. The foil for the book is 10 Black women are the forward authors, and they wrote intimate stories and like wove these narratives about what their experiences were living in a Black body as a woman. And I could not thank them enough for also adding some amazing content to the book. So that's in a nutshell what we're talking about. We're celebrating Black folks. We're being honest and real and being authentic about what a celebration looks like.
So bringing this kind of back to Juneteenth, what does and I'm seeing this even amongst our community. Some folks are saying Happy Juneteenth, and other folks are like, no, that's not how we come at this. We're commemorating. It's not a Happy Juneteenth. It's a moment of really just kind of sitting in deep reverence and reflecting. What does this mean for how we even go about commemorating this moment, where there are members within our own community that do view this as a celebration, that want to bring joy to it? How do we celebrate?
I think in my opinion, I think you do as best as you can. I think a lot of times being Black, we are so critical of our experiences and things that we oftentimes we didn't create an enslavement system, that we had to be, freed from. So whatever way we choose to celebrate getting over that, whatever the systems were that got us over that, however that happened, there's something worthy of a celebration to say that particular way of being held captive inside of this country and held hostage in this way or whatever was no longer, So there is something to celebrate. And I also completely understand people saying that we have to be really clear about like what that experience was, and that this was a political move. It wasn't necessarily a freedom, for us, because we also recognize that though they were made aware that, on June 19th, 1865, that the laws have been changed, what we recognize is that a lot of people were kept or continued to be slaves afterward, not of their own will. We know that people were killed because they wanted to leave off of plantations. We recognize that the systems of terrorism continued on after that. So there's a lot to be retrospective on and to really acknowledge. But again, I think the theme for this is context. You have to have context on the whole thing. What has all happened that's got us here is incredibly important to us being able to figure out whether we're celebrating or memorializing or doing something in between the two.
Yeah. I think we have time to take a call. Phil on line one. Hey, Phil, thank you so much for choosing a safe space with us today. How are you and what's on your mind?
So, Brother Phil, I think you bring up a great point about the complexities of race and ethnicity and culture that exist inside of American context. One of those things is everything is not just centered on Black people being Black alone. You know, we have Black folks that are Afro-Latino. We have Black folks that are Black and Indigenous. We have Black folk that live in various portions of life that are affected by these systems and that these celebrations have to be inclusive of. So I say to you, thank you for uprooting that as a part of the conversation, that there has to be some complex environment that we talk about, not only where Black people live in its traditional sense of us that come from Africa and were enslaved in America, but how that is also a transitional conversation too, that a lot of people are affected and harmed by the white supremacist cultures that existed in the early advent of America. So first of all, thank you for uprooting that as a point of conversation. To your earliest question about how many people in my group, I'm just imagining you're saying that, like, how many people do I know that are also thinking about Indigenous culture as well? And I don't think that that's a topic of conversation that I have heard as abundantly as I think it should be. But I think as we're starting to talk about it being a national holiday and we're building out events, I think that is the work that you, myself, and everybody should be doing to make sure that we have, land acknowledgement, for people of Indigenous spirit that have built this country as well, and that were stolen from their home as well. I think that's a great point to mention.
Dennis, really just appreciating uh, all of the great perspective and food for thought that you're bringing to us today. So we're going to switch gears, y'all, a bit, because there's a lot happening in June, and there is a lot that was buzzing today. And so I'm going to start with uh, another aspect of celebration that happens during this month, and that is Pride Month. And Dennis, wanted to get your thoughts on what this month of awareness of celebration means to you.
Yeah, I mean, Pride is a special time. I'm a gay Black man, so it's a special time to be able to um, like have a portion to celebrate the fuller parts of yourself, and to be able to kind of think in a lot of environments intersectionally in some ways. I think Pride as an event and a space sometimes can be whitewashed like other things that we have in some ways or whatever. But I love the way that Black and brown folks continue to like uproot us into the conversation, and how, when outside of a pandemic time frame or whatever, I would love going outside and just being able to see the houses in the middle of the street, just like, voguing and doing everything, like all the things that are Black within culture and in subculture being expressed and being expressed by us so that it's not exploited. I think it's something that I've just really appreciated. And I think Black trans folks, Black gay folk, Black lesbians, Black people have given so much to Black history that's not necessarily a part of just the context of being in the LGBTQIA community. It's really about, like, we've been a part of conversations from Bayard Rustin to, loads of people, Barbara Jordan, to so many people who have been politically, aligned with what is happening in our world and supporting Black people. So I think it's a really great opportunity for even us as Black folk to be able to think about the intersectionality of how we've been supported by people that may have different norms and proclivities and lifestyles and orientations and everything else. So that's what I think about during the month.
Yeah, I appreciated the poem you had posted on your Instagram. And loves, if you're looking to connect with Dennis over on Instagram, he is Dennis Maurice. That's DENNIS Maurice, Dennis Maurice. But there was a poem that you had you shared. I believe the title is "How is Sugar Born?" A
Mm-hmm.
poem for my Black trans family. Can you tell us a bit about that poem and what inspired it?
Yeah, I appreciate you doing that research. The poem initially was a meditation because what I really got concerned about, and this was while I was finishing up the publishing Blackwash, I really got concerned that a lot of times the nativity of Black life started with Black death. It started with hashtags. It started with, when we were seeing people laid out in the street, Michael Brown vis-a-vis, you know what I mean? These things of like we don't know names until they are gone. And in particular, when we talk about Black women and Black trans women in particular, there is an erasure from the conversation. In particular, that I wanted to just be able to uproot. And I was looking at the case of Tony McDade, who was a Black trans man that was killed by the police in Florida. And after like reviewing a lot of this and thinking about Dominique Remy Fells in Philly, and just like all the cases of just like Black trans bodies being like dislocated from this world, and us not being able to have a conversation until they die, as if we don't see them in life, is something that just didn't sit well with me. And I wanted just to be able to say something that I see you. I want to know you better and better and better living in a body breathing facility. Like I want to know you in this life, not in the other side of soil. You know what I mean? So I think that that's something that I wanted to be able to talk about. And it was originally posted on Medium, and then later I just added it to the book as well. And I have a video of me sharing it so everybody can look at it as well if you wanted to.
Yeah. And what do you hope folks ultimately take away from it?
That trans people live. You know what I mean? That folk live before they die. I think sometimes we forget, especially in an American context, it is very easy to forget that we were here before we were announced as being gone. You know what I mean? I remember when Marilyn Mosby had a hashtag coming around her name at post Freddie Gray's murder by the Baltimore police. There was a hashtag around Marilyn Mosby because she was the prosecutor on the case. She was the DA in Baltimore, and she came in with fire saying, we are going to investigate this. We're going through, and we never heard a DA really kind of give that much, gravitational pull to say like, this is wrong in that way. Well, publicly, I mean, sure other people have said it, but it was one of the first times I had heard it, I should say. And her hashtag was trending. And I said, I feel so blessed to be able to see a hashtag trending of a body breathing living person, you know what I mean, and not just always being, because for a period of time, especially in the last 5 years, that is when we see hashtags. We see it about the dehumanization, the devaluing, and the death of Black bodies. And I would love people just to really be able to reckon with the fact that we are alive today. You know what I mean? That we live in this space. We have to uproot that into the conversation.
Yeah. Appreciate that. And so I want to kind of, I guess, shift gears just a bit slightly, because one of the things we saw today is the Supreme Court ruling in favor of the Catholic Social Services. And so Leslie Cooper of the ACLU said in response to that, I'll quote her here: "We are relieved that the court did not recognize a license to discriminate based on religious beliefs. This is good news for LGBTQ people and for everyone who depends on the protections of non-discrimination laws." Now, fast forward a bit, right? Adam Liptak, a New York Times reporter, gave this kind of summation of what we just witnessed happen today. And he said, and I quote, "The decision was a setback for gay rights and further evidence that religious groups almost always prevail." Dennis, wanted to get your reaction.
So I think what we're learning here is that there is no division between church and state. And I think that that's something that's more critical. And I think even people that are in the clergy and in churches across should be thinking about this as well, because that lack of division is problematic for a lot of reasons, for a lot of different people, and for the broader context of religion, not just Catholicism. But the thing that gets me the most is that a Catholic agency, granted this is not the Catholic Church itself, but a Catholic agency of any kind, focusing a judgment of morality against anybody in regard to children when it has for the last 60 plus years been at the epicenter of some of the largest cases of child molestation across the country seems hypocritical to a way that like almost feels preposterous. And I think we can't move on without saying that. So I think that there's a lot of conflicting identities that I just get incredibly that sour the moment. I get why it had to be unanimous. I get that this is why the Supreme Court voted in the way that they did. But I also think that it gives optics again at the local level to be able to amplify in the larger court levels when we start thinking about some of our upcoming federal and midterm elections. First, final thoughts on what we've just talked about. I think it's very important that we celebrate and pay homage to in whatever ways we feel most comfortable and most appropriate for Juneteenth. I think it is a point of being able to acknowledgement in whatever ways we choose to do that. So I just tell Black folk all around and all people to be able to celebrate this point in history, being able to be uprooted as a clear, evident part of our history collectively. And I also think that we give homage to places that have, like in Galveston, Texas, and Texas all over, that have always celebrated Juneteenth before it was a national holiday, and all the Black people that have continued to be able to make this a prominent portion of our historical conversation. So I hope that we do that. In regard to the conversations of LGBT rights and in the Catholic Church, I think also govern your sources is what I'll leave that at. Govern your sources of who is the focal point of morality, and I think take some deep introspection around what the moral judgments are and who is able to make those cases. I'll leave that there. And if you want to know more about me, I am on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Everything is at Dennis Maurice. So if you go to at DENNISMAURICE, you'll be able to find me. And through web portals, it is IamDennisMaurice.com. My company, InvestBLK, Invest Black, is investblk.org. And if you want to learn more about my book or purchase a copy, you can go to veryblackbooks.com and be able to do that there. And I thank you so much, Syreeta, for having me and letting me be a part of this. And thank you for saving space for me.
Absolutely. We will always save space for you. So I look forward to welcome you back on the show. And I'll be